won't notice. So hi, I'm Michael Saunders. I'm talking about social influences and charitable giving. British people, you might be able to tell by the voice and my demeanour that I'm British, are generous, not as generous as Americans, I am honour bound to tell you, but we're pretty generous. We give about £10 billion, or about $15 billion a year to charity, and we have more than 150,000 charities. We really like getting involved in stuff. But that rate of giving has been flat for about 30 years, about 0.4 of 1% of our consumption spending, which is about what we spend on cheese. So we really like cheese. In most of Europe, we like cheese, but this is still not ideal because we figure that cheese probably isn't so socially deserving. And this is despite the fact that in the last 30 years, our country has introduced quite generous tax incentives for giving, and we've seen the professionalization of fundraising. So one of the, a hypothesis, this is sort of what passes for a stylized fact, is that the fundamental factors of giving haven't changed. People are still engaging in the same kind of mental accounting. So their decision to donate $2,000 a year, when they've used that up, they stop. That kind of thing can still be happening, won't have changed very much over the course of 30 years. And things like the prestige motive hasn't really changed either. Young men still want to attract young women, and so they will still buy anything that will make them more attractive or signal how awesome they are. But one plaque is pretty much a substitute for another. So if I offer you some prestige incentive for giving, then once you've got your plaque, you don't really need a second one. Much like I imagine one doesn't really need a second Ferrari after you've bought the first one. You've really made your point about what kind of person you are. So what we're going to look at is non-giving interactions. These are interactions which aren't typically between charities and potential donors, but exist in a wider context. This is so you're in an environment where giving isn't the reason you're there, and it's not really the reason anyone's there. And so about a third of people make donations in this kind of environment, which you've gathered from surveys. And about 13% of donors make gifts in the workplace, but the size of these gifts is very small. So it's about 1% of all non-legacy giving. Legacy giving is obviously quite a large part of things. So what we've done is we've worked with a large investment bank, which I'm not allowed to name. I am allowed to name it for the first part, but I'm not allowed to name the second part because I haven't asked their permission yet, because I only analysed data this morning. So I won't tell you. I will tell you, if you imagine a German bank, it's the most German bank going. So I'm not telling you, you're drawing your own conclusions. And so we're fundraising for two charities which the bankers have chosen themselves. Meningitis Research UK, which does basically what it says in the tin, and Help a Capital Child, which helps children in London who are homeless. And we're asking these guys to donate a day's salary to charity. They can't donate less, and they can donate in increments of a day's salary. I can tell you that I have 6 people in my data who give more than 1 day's salary. 5 of them give 2 days' salary, generous guys. 1 of them gives 28 days' salary. I think he made a mistake. So in order to give, what you have to do, there are a few ways. The easiest way is to get your staff ID badge and swipe it against a little scanner that we keep on the wall. So I can imagine that probably some guys just going, this is how you do it, and then he gives more than a month's salary to charity. So that's not great. So I've excluded him from my analysis because he's a little bit weird. I don't know whether he fessed up a month later and said, please God, give me some money. But, we'll see. So the average donation I observe in my sample is £1,000, or roughly $1,500. So these guys are not particularly standard. This is what a bank looks like from space. In a map, if you're interested. We have 66 business units, which I treat as clusters for randomization. Our guys are not representative. They're mostly male, they're mostly young, they're mostly evil. No, they're lovely. And they're mostly quite wealthy. But they're also part of a group that is quite unlikely to give, which is to say young, selfish men with economics degrees. Those of you. And I have 6,175 of them. I'm not allowed to experiment on the ancillary staff or the admin staff in this bank because they thought that was unkind. Firstly, we're not going to pay them very much, and secondly, we're going to experiment on them. So I only get bankers in my sample. So we're going to experiment a few different types of social influence. Everyone gets an email from the CEO, and most people, or half people in fact, randomly assigned, get one which says, "Dear colleague, please make a donation to charity today." And some people get one that says, "Dear John," so it addresses them by their first name. If your name's not John, substitute your first name where I've written down John. This is what an email looks like for those of you who still live in the 1920s. Sure, that's none of you. You're all very technologically savvy, I'm sure. Some people, which is randomized to a business unit, are greeted by a volunteer who's got a flyer. The flyer contains information about the campaign. Today we're giving 1 day's salary to charity, and they are told to, as a banker approaches them, you can spot a banker pinstripe suit, really expensive watch, pass them a flyer and say, today's the day we're giving 1 day's salary to charity. This is what a volunteer looks like. Those of you who've never seen young women before, all of our volunteers are young women. There's a nice finding in the behavioural economics literature which finds that, not to put too fine a point of it, attractive young women are good at fundraising. Attractive young men are no better at fundraising than ugly young men, so there's hope for me yet. Other business units are visited by volunteers who look exactly the same, not exactly the same, they are not homogenous. And they're all given a packet of sweets. This is a packet of Skittles. I'm not sure if you have them over here. They cost me £1.50 or roughly $2.25 per packet. And we give them all of them. It's not even juice reciprocity. There's no conditionality. It's not like give me $1,500 worth of donation, I'll give you $2 worth of sweets. We're just giving it to everyone. Anecdotally, we observed that pretty much everybody takes both the flyer and the sweet. I don't suspect the flyer lasts as long or is enjoyed as much. This is what a packet of sweets looks like, so it's branded. Most of the £1.50, $2.25 cost of the sweets is in the packaging. It's not in the sweets themselves. You can get this much sweets for about 60 pence, so just short of $1 if you go down the road. So bear in mind, our population here should not be influenced by this because these guys are investment bankers. These are supposed to be hyper-rational, hyper-intelligent individuals. There's no way we're going to motivate them with 60p worth of sweets. Finally, I think, actually not finally, anyway, throughout the day we have a bunch of celebrities, which is a phrase I use because I am under contract to call them celebrities. They are moderately famous people. We have a Paralympic fencer and a DJ from a London radio station none of you have ever heard of, including those of you who used to work and live in London. So not exactly very famous people. Not everyone is visited, and the order in which these celebrities are wandering around the building is randomized. So they go to the 3rd floor, then the 7th floor, then the 9th floor, determined by my random number generator. The places they go aren't randomized. So the bank says, these are the buildings they're going to go to, and I can only randomize the order in which they go to. So there's some risk of selection, because if I was running the CSR department at the bank, I would send the celebrities to the places I think there's the most money to be made, people who are most likely to be impressed by Paralympic fencers. I'm not sure how I would work out where those people would be, but it's a possibility. So we're going to conduct a separate analysis on these guys, because we have a stepped wedge trial within our main trial.
Does the fencer bring his weapon?
He does not bring his weapon. He brings his wheelchair. We also have a wheelchair rugby player, which for those of you who've seen wheelchair rugby is a very aggressive sport. And he bought his proper wheelchair, I say proper, they're all proper, just his sporting wheelchair, complete with serious war damage. So those guys were bombing it around the bank all day. That was really great. Those guys were actually, I say they're not really celebrities, maybe they're not that famous, but they're really great guys. 4 days after our main experiment, we email everybody and we say, it's not too late, you can still donate. And half of them are told what proportion of their colleagues have already donated, 7.5%. So not a great many of their colleagues have already donated. This is what we call sort of a negative social norm. The social norm is to do the thing I don't want you to do. This is what a reminder email looks like, very similar to the first one with different words in it. So our control group, so these are the guys who get no sweets, no flyer, no volunteer, and an impersonal email. They're not visited by celebrities. 5% of those guys give. So not very many, but not too bad either. Volunteers have absolutely no effect. So we have the sort of stylized fact that people give to people. I send round to the youngest volunteers I can find, basically IRAs, to hand out flyers. Absolutely no effect whatsoever. So these guys are not giving to people. Sweets, however, sorry, celebrities, very small effect. We'll come back to that. Sweets, massive effect. So we've basically doubled the number of people giving by giving them a small packet of sweets. So in terms of ROI, each of these donations, as I said, is about $1,500. And the packet of sweets, which is inducing 1 in 16 people to make a donation, costs me £1.50. So it's pretty good. Personal email has an effect. This is all compared to the control group. So it has another large effect. So that's really interesting. We've replicated this part this year. This part we haven't quite replicated this year, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. So what we can do, because we know their rank in the company, I can tell how senior they are. I can see how do different people in the company respond to these different treatments. So for the CEO email treatment, analysts, so guys at the bottom, typically people like me who care more about numbers than money, these guys are really generous and really nice and really heavily respond to a personal email from the CEO, much more than people in the middle. And then as you get to the far side of our data, these guys at the top, these guys who actually might know the CEO, might have a personal relationship with him, these guys respond quite heavily as well. They're also systematically more generous, but they're also, as somewhat is implied by their job titles, systematically richer. These guys in the middle, not so generous, not so responsive. So that's quite interesting. Our sweets treatment. Again, analysts just love giving, and they love responding to treatments. They're nice guys. These guys, by the way, aren't skewing all of my results because there's only about 100 of them. Nobody really cares about analysts in banks, apparently. Associates, much less generous, still quite motivated. This is assistant vice president. By the way, this is the largest category. Assistant vice president is basically the modal group of people in banks. They've got title inflation like nobody's business. These guys don't respond very much. These guys respond a little bit more. Directors respond quite a lot, and we actually have no effect at all on managing directors. So if you want to get somebody to give using sweets and you're targeting your sweets, do it at the lower end of the spectrum. So that produces a result where the average size of a donation given in response to my reciprocity treatment is smaller than the average size of donation in the control group. We have many more of them. We don't lose anybody. But the average size is smaller, which is consistent with other findings in this area. So if we look at the full sample of people, I showed these before. That's the wrong graph. That's not good. Oh, it is. Oh, it's fine. Sorry. There's supposed to be a graph there. Imagine there's a graph there in which you have 5 and 7%. I don't seem to have that for some reason. So if we look at the reduced sample of people who are receiving celebrities and people who will eventually receive a celebrity, what we see is that receiving a celebrity this hour makes you 1% more likely to give a donation than who do not see this hour, so people who haven't seen them yet. By the time you're at 1 hour past that, the other guys are starting to catch up. By the time you get to 3 hours past that, there is no difference. All these celebrities are actually doing, if we look into the data, is they're making people who would have donated anyway donate earlier in the day. So if you've only got someone's attention for a short amount of time, maybe a celebrity is a good thing to do. However, in general, you're not really inducing marginal donations. I have another graph that shows exactly the same thing. Don't know why. Anyway, our reminder email was sent 4 days after the campaign. We're excluding some people. The people we're excluding are people who weren't there on the first day, because then it's not really a reminder email so much as it's just an email. It might be the first time they've heard of it. So our reminder email, 1.4% with too many zeros. People respond to the reminder email by donating. Very, very small, completely insignificant change among people who were given the social information. So that's not a great sign. However, I sort of figured it was going to go down when I found out how few people were going to make a donation. However, what we can do is we can again look at the subgroups. Our analysts, basically anybody who's going to give who's an analyst in response to the reminder email sees no one's doing it, thinks they're not going to be a mug, stops donating. Associates, none of them donate anyway. Assistant vice presidents, again, negative, no real effect on vice presidents. Directors and managing directors, however, and this is the reason I'm showing you this graph, it's not just a series of nothing happening, these guys get significantly more likely to donate when they find out that hardly anyone's donated. So I don't have a good theoretical understanding of why that is. I'm hoping to be able to do more work on it. But I think it's interesting that these guys at the top respond positively to the fact that no one's doing something. So either they're elitists, or it could be, and this is sort of what I'm hoping, these guys care about the reputation of the bank more than they care about conforming. So these guys donating ups the amount of money that's been raised. It makes the bank look better. So far, we found that social influence on the CEO has a large effect. Volunteers have no effect at all. Sweets are great. Celebrities don't have any effect at all. And negative norms boost giving by the top people in the firm. So this year, the same bank let me back in, because they're idiots. I wanted to replicate the sweets finding, so they let me do that. They said, okay, we're not going to send out, we'll randomize who gets volunteers, and we'll give all the volunteers sweets this time, because volunteers by themselves aren't doing anything. And in any case, we're constrained by the number of volunteers we have, so we can't send them everywhere, so let's randomize. So that was really good of them. And we've added a new treatment, which is ambassadors. So I should say the next 3 or 4 slides are work with Mike Norton from Harvard Business School. The rest of it's sole authored. So these are very preliminary findings. These are less than 6 hours old at this point. I think they're probably at 5.5 hours old now. So please don't cite this bit. My N is a little bit larger, because in the past they only gave me access to London. I now have access to Birmingham as well, which is another city in the UK. So we found these ambassadors by working with the CSR department to find people who either have given in every year of this campaign. So this campaign's been going for 5 years now, so they've given 4 times previously. Over the course of the last year, they've given more than 5 days' salary to charity through the company. We don't know about their other giving. And people who've used up all of their 5 days, and/or people who've used up all of their 5 days of volunteering time. So they're allowed to take 5 days off work to go and volunteer, and who are a grade VP or higher. These guys are senior guys in the company who really seem to be into giving through the company. So we figure they're probably good people to be ambassadors. So we assign them to either receive nothing, so we just ignored some of them, Always email to say, thanks for all of your giving. This campaign's happening now. Please consider donating. So this is a marginal sort of ask. Thanks. Or we asked them to, or we sent them saying, thanks for all of your work. We know you're a leader. Please reach out to your colleagues and give a donation. I can't show you these emails, which is why I'm essentially reading them out to you, because they've got the name of the bank, which I'm not allowed to show you. And since I'm being recorded, I definitely can't show it because they might find out. So please reach out to your colleagues in the bank, people in your business unit, and tell them to donate as well. And then finally, we emailed and said, please reach out to your colleagues at the bank, ask them to donate, and tell them about the contribution their donations are making. So emphasize to these people who you're talking to about how important it is that you donate because of the good you're going to do. I should say we have 2 new charities now because they randomly vote on them. Well, they vote on them every year. Me and Dean Carlin tried to get them to take IPA so that we could use it for more research. We were unsuccessful in that regard. So we have 2 charities, the impact of whom is somewhat suspect. So it's a charity that helps elephants, is our main one. I didn't really realize elephants needed so much help. But anyway, experiment's an experiment, I guess. So I haven't got the results for the suites on here. What I can tell you is the results for the suites are, blessed be, exactly the same this year, and not significantly different to they were last year. So that's me happy, because otherwise I'd have to stand here and tell you that everything I told you for the last 20 minutes was completely wrong. Oops, sorry, wasted your time. Thankfully, those are all the same. So control group, get 4.15% of those guys donating. What we have this year is the CEO who's refused to send out another email and refused to take part in another experiment because there was a little bit of backlash to him personally from some of the more senior people in the bank when this was reported in the press that he'd been experimenting on his staff. So he's refused to do that. So we send a personal email from the CSR department, which basically is the same as an impersonal email from the CEO. So that's why this figure is, well, it's one potential reason why this figure is lower than we would otherwise expect it to be. These guys who we just said thanks to, these guys roughly the same. So these are, these are people who are in business units where the vice president, so the leader of that business unit, is one of our ambassadors who receives one of these messages. So roughly the same. So the reason we included this is because we were worried that essentially these ambassadors were systematically in places where they were just more giving. The vice presidents were hiring people into their business units who were more giving because they were more giving. So that doesn't seem to be the case, or at least under this specification. Asking people to reach out, we get up to 10.85%, so a big increase again. I should say these are preliminary findings, so please don't read too heavily into them. Especially don't read too heavily into this one, because I'm almost certain it's wrong. So I was taught when I was an undergraduate, which was longer ago than I care to admit, that if you see a result that looks too good to be true, it probably is. So I'm going to go and I'm going to have to interrogate this data a little bit more before I can give you an answer. I thought it would be disingenuous for me not to report the result, but there it is. I don't believe it. Please don't cite it. But yeah, so that's, I think, everything I have to say. Yes?
So did the letters to the ambassadors say explicitly to send to people in your business unit?
Yeah.
Or you guys just assume that that's the people you're going to contact?
They said explicitly people in your business unit, because I wanted to be able to focus the effect. Yes?
To clarify the last slide, the response is by those who were ambassadors as opposed to those who they were reaching out to?
No, it's responses to people in the business units, to the people who work for them.
So they increased the giving among their associates
By, yeah.
X%. Okay.
All of the ambassadors donated. Yes, okay.
Consider doing a treatment where you do sort of cumulative? I mean, if I was doing this, I'd put them all together and do everything I could, you know.
So there are some places, so I have got these all stacked on top of each other in some places because of the randomization. So most of the treatments are individually randomized. So I have some of them stacked on top of each other because the clusters interact with the other ones. I have no significant interaction effects. In general, the interactions are, particularly for the suites and for the personal email, that interaction is negative, but it isn't significant. So by adding these up, you still get more donations than you would have done with either one of them independently. Yes.
This may be asking too much, but do you observe communication between the ambassador and, like, does the ambassador CC the CSR department when they send the email to the staff?
They don't. I asked for them for that to be included. Please do this. However, they refused to do that because basically I'm not allowed to get too in the way, and they're being incredibly generous, letting me do anything. Yes.
I'm curious if you have any connections or interactions with potentially United Way or United Way Worldwide, because this is dead on their solicitation model in employee campaigns in the US?
I don't have any connections there. I work with some payroll giving agencies in the UK, but not with United Way. Obviously, if anybody wants to talk to me, I would be delighted to.
Driver.
Excellent.
Happy to.
Please email michael.sanders@bristol.ac.uk.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.